Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing recipe 24 of cooking my way through Magnolia Table's cookbook. We are trying Syrian donuts today for the very first time. One of the first steps is to have, so this technically isn't a step, but I couldn't find ground aniseed. It wasn't ground, so I had to ground it myself. And I also don't have a mortar and pestle, so I'm using a mason jar and this little metal container because I am creative in a bind. Don't let anyone tell you different. So I had no idea what this spice was until I smelt it, and then I was like, oh, this smells like black licorice, and I hate black licorice. So right from the jump, I was like, God, am I not gonna like these? I went with 2 teaspoons instead of 3 because I was nervous, and I already tasted the donuts. They taste amazing. You can barely tell that there's anything in there. And so I would say if you don't like it, go with 2 teaspoons instead of 3. But if you love black licorice, do your thing. Go all in, baby. All right, so now that you've ground that up, hopefully with your real mortar and pestle instead of your mason jar, you're gonna go ahead and start measuring out your flour. This recipe calls for 8 cups of all-purpose flour, plus a little bit more for the work surface. So if you're planning on making this, make sure you got a large bag of flour, because this almost wiped me out of whatever leftover flour I had. To this, you're going to go ahead and add 2 cups of sugar, but it does say to reserve 1 tablespoon of sugar from this 2 cups. I know that seems very strange instead of just saying like add the 2 cups, but so take 1 tablespoon out of that second cup and save it for later. I just dumped it right back in there and put it to the side. And now you're also going to add cinnamon. This calls for 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. I made a mistake. I tried to put some back in, then I realized, oh, you're doing 2 teaspoons anyways, you dummy. You could have just left it out there. Oh, see, this is when I realized. And then after this, you're also going to add, 1 teaspoon of sea salt. And then you're going to add that 2 teaspoons of anise that you just ground by hand. There it is in all its glory. All right, now you're just gonna take a whisk and just make sure everything's combined. There we go. This is probably the easiest part of the whole recipe. All right, now once you're done with this, you're gonna start mixing your eggs and your nuts. So, all the pun intended. This calls for 3 large eggs. So you're gonna go ahead and crack those in there. Then you're gonna beat those together, and then you're gonna go ahead and add 1/2 cup of chopped walnuts and 1/2 cup of chopped pecans. Right, now that our nuts and eggs are all thoroughly combined, we're gonna go ahead and pop that into the dry mixture. And you're just gonna mix it together. This is going to be a dry mixture still, even with the eggs and stuff in it. And once you've mixed this in, you're just gonna go ahead and set it to the side, because now we're gonna start with the butter mixture. right, so in a medium saucepan, you're gonna go ahead and put 2 sticks of salted butter. And then to this, you're gonna go ahead and add 1.5 cups of milk. And here's where that extra random tablespoon of sugar comes into play. You're gonna go ahead and pop that tablespoon of sugar in there. And then you're gonna heat everything up until it's about 105 to 115 degrees. Make sure everything's melted and combined. Then we're gonna go ahead and remove it from the heat. And after this, we're gonna go ahead and add our dry yeast component. Now, the recipe calls for 2 1/4 ounce packets of active dry yeast. Ooh, isn't that pretty? Anyways, so I don't have that. I have it in a container. So if you don't have the packets and you have the container, it ends up being 5 teaspoons. So if you're using the packet, use 2 1/4 ounce packets. If you're using the container of dry yeast, do 5 teaspoons. And then you're just gonna let this sit for about 5 minutes while the yeast blossoms. All right, now we're gonna take that mixture with the yeast and the butter and everything, and we're gonna pour it into our dry mixture. Now, in the book, she says, and I quote, where does she say it? I use my hands. Girl, this was piping hot. Like, clearly only women who have given birth can mix this dough with their hands. That's literally the only explanation I have. I touched it with my finger and I was like, ow. It was horrible. So I used a spatula, and then when I got tired of the spatula, see, I was like, eat? Not for me. And I don't have that kind of strength. I want to use these fingers in the future. So I used a spatula until I got sick and tired of it, and then I let it cool down for a little bit, and then I used my hands. And then I just used my hands to form it until nothing was sticking to the sides of the container and nothing was sticking to my hands. Then that's when I knew it was ready. And it's definitely going to be a very dense dough. Like, this was very, very, very heavy. I feel like this isn't your typical donut. Like, I feel like donuts, we think of them as very airy and light and fluffy. These are very dense, very thick, see, this thing weighed a ton. All right, so then you're gonna go ahead and cover it with a clean kitchen towel. I used a bathroom towel because it's the only one I had clean. And you're gonna let it rest for 2 hours. After those 2 hours, you're gonna come back onto a lightly floured surface, and you're gonna be rolling these out into little golf-shaped balls. And then you're gonna, I tried on I need to get an actual workspace like that. And then you're gonna roll them into about 6 inches. And then you're going to form them into a donut and kind of seal off the sides and press them down. And then you're gonna continue this with your next, however many it makes. The recipe says, I think that it makes 3 dozen, and that's right on par. I think mine made 3 dozen as well. So yeah, this is kind of what they look like. I actually ended up scrapping this one in the end because I hated it compared to the other ones. I should never record the first one I do. And this part was probably the longest. I would say this probably took a good 30 minutes because there was just so much dough to get through. So I didn't even do a time lapse of the whole thing. I just gave up and stopped. But then you're gonna pop these in the oven at 350 degrees for 15 minutes until the tops are kind of lightly brown. And I ended up having to do mine in batches. So it took me about 3 batches. And then while that's going, you're going to want to start on the the syrup dip. So the syrup dip requires half a stick of salted butter, and it also requires a 1/4 cup of milk, 1 cup of water, and then 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. So there's the water. Now on here it says, bring to a boil over medium-high heat, then reduce the heat and simmer until the syrup is clear and thickens slightly, 7 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna call BS on that because I was waiting on this for what felt like forever to get this stuff to thicken up. Oh yeah, sorry, 2 cups of sugar. Can't forget the sugar, baby. So yeah, this took way longer than 10 minutes. I don't know if I was doing something wrong. I feel like I followed everything to a T, but who knows? So be prepared for it to, and even in the end, I still didn't feel like it was very thick, It didn't feel like a syrup to me, but I don't know, who knows? So then after this is done, you're gonna wanna take all your donuts and get them lined up on like a cooling rack. I put a little piece of parchment paper under mine to catch any like of the excess. And then she said to coat the bottoms and the tops. I didn't know how to do it without burning my fingers again because it was very hot. So I took tongs and just picked them up and dropped them into the syrup dip, and then just put them on the rack to cool. And I did the same process with all 3 dozen of the donuts. And yeah, then you are done. It says that these can stay good for up to 2 days if you keep them in like a room temperature space. They turned out beautiful. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for our next recipe, recipe 25. I haven't decided what it is yet, but I'm sure it's going to be good.